Hello everyone, welcome to this particular video. Well, in this particular video we'll be discussing the concept of SQL injections and how the SQL queries you can execute over certain web applications to fetch out the entire database. So first of all, talking about the setup, what we have done over here is we are running two virtual machines over here, and as you can see that in one of the virtual machines which is running on this particular IP address, we are running a web server on it which is hosting the damn vulnerable web application or the DVWA. So we are accessing that particular web application on another virtual machine over here, as you can see. So now what's our target is, after logging into this particular virtual machine, our target is SQL injection. So first of all, we'll be seeing the normal SQL injection, and in another video we'll be discussing about the types of SQL injections. So in this particular section of SQL injection, what we'll be doing is we'll be dealing certain things like how the SQL injection work and what basically is the SQL injection. So you might have seen that there are certain things where you can pass the parameters to them over certain web applications. What this means is, whenever you are surfing any website or you are using certain web application, there will be certain objects where you can pass the data. Like suppose you are passing certain usernames and password, so that is the data which is passed by the user. So now what's our target is, we need to pass certain data and that will be executed over the server so that we should fetch out the database out of it. So how to do that? Basically we'll be passing up the data in this particular section over this text box, and once we click on submit, a submit request is being submitted, and in the back end it is being processed by our web application, and then it is moved further to the database. Now if we are not using any of the validation techniques, or suppose if any coder or the programmer is there who has not adopted any validation techniques, so we can easily pass out certain special characters in it. And once we pass out certain special characters, what we can do is, like, we can just pass the query that will be executed over the web application server, and it will fetch out the data from the database. And what that query will do exactly is, whenever that query will execute, it should always return the true statement. So in general terms, whatever the system will understand is either 0 or 1. That is known as the binary format. So whenever a query is executed, it should return 1. That is, the query is true. And whenever the query returns false, that means the state of the query is 0. That is false. So now here we need to execute any certain query which should always return 1. Now let's take an example. You might be thinking that if we can directly pass any number, let's say 1 over here, and if we try to submit that, then we can easily fetch out the thing. But in the real world it's barely impossible. We cannot generally pass the 1 and we can easily fetch out the data, because 1, it will be taken up as a string and it is not executed on the back end. As you can see that nothing happened. So what we can do is we need to pass certain query which should be executed on the backend. Now to do that thing, what we can do up is we need to put up certain query, the SQL query, which should be executed on the backend and which should always return the true value. So to do that, what we can do is we'll be simply passing up a simple query, that is 1 or 1 equal to 1. Now what this particular statement means is 1 or 1 equal to 1. Now on the back end, this query, when we click on the submit request, the query will be sent in this particular format only. Now you might be thinking that why we didn't put this colon in the very first and the very last of this query. That is why, because whenever this query is submitted, it will always be taken as this particular format. So now if we have done that thing, like if we have manually put it up this thing, then it should be gone around somewhere like this. So it will be invalidated and it will not be executed. So to pass up a certain query, it should be in this format, which should be run over the server, and we should get the database. Now let's try up with this query, and before trying up this query we must know that this is particularly the OR operator which we will be using to passing the queries, which should always return the true value. As it is an OR operator, so talking about this particular expression, whenever there is a value that is 1 or 1, that will always be 1. And if there is a value like 1 or 0, then also it will take only the true value. So taking up the truth table of the particular OR operator, so if it is the value is 1 or 1, then it should always return 1. And if the value is 1 or 0, then also the value is 1. In the similar manner, if it is 0 or 1, then also the value is 1. But it will be 0 in case of 0 and 0. When both the operands on the left hand side will be 0, 0, then only this certain query will return 0. So that is how it happens in the back end. So now let us just pass this query. As you can see that once we pass up this query, we are able to fetch out all the results from the database. Why? Because as you can see in the URL, whenever we are passing, the ID object of the particular request is passing this query. Now if that ID object is returning true, so it will return all the values, it will fetch out all the values from the entire database and give us the results. So this was one of the small example for SQL injection. Well, in the upcoming videos we'll be diving deep into the SQL injection, and we'll be learning the different types of SQL injections and how they are run, and how we can use certain tools to fetch out the database. So well, this was all about the general part of the SQL injection. Thank you. Thanks for watching this video.